Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Springwise Sessions interview with the inimitable Chris Turner. I've been really looking forward to this. Good morning, Chris.
Morning. Thanks for having me, James. Great to be here.
And it's great to get you the day after you've had a bit of holiday, so you're fresh and ready for this interview. And Chris, for everyone listening, is the Executive Director of B Lab UK. So really leads the B Corp movement in the UK. What an amazing role to have. And actually, Chris, you've had an equally fascinating career to date. And I was wondering to start with, if you could just give us a quick introduction to your path to this amazing role that you have now, and how did that happen? How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I'd be happy to. And as you say, it's an amazing role. So very lucky to do what I do. And it was a sort of meandering path that led me here. So yeah, I started off actually in marketing, but I quickly quite quickly didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but quite quickly realized I wanted sort of meaning, purpose, behind what I was doing, and I went and did some work in the US on political campaigning, and that was sort of a bit of a break and a kind of reset, and at that point got involved in some small, essentially startups really, that were looking at innovation, and so a couple of businesses there, one of which was Springwise. And what that did was sort of expose me really to the amazing kind of breadth of exciting new things that were happening around the world, whether that's kind of product design all the way through to sort of some of the marketing and creativity stuff, but all the way through to business models and sort of slightly more kind of profound innovation going on in the business space. And that was where I got particularly interested in kind of social enterprise. So those businesses which are designed specifically for positive impact and to solve a problem for society or for the planet. And that led me, there I was sort of thinking, right, well, I'm right at the end of business, which is really focused on problem solving in that context. And so I wanted to throw myself into those problems, into those challenges, and understand that context in more detail. So that led me into international development, where I spent a few years working for a variety of NGOs and foundations, large portion of that time in East Africa, but probably just then on the sort of on the international development spectrum, on the business end of it. So helping those foundations and NGOs cultivate sort of markets and encourage businesses who were trying to solve challenges. And then from there, I sort of thought, well, actually, I think, probably I'm a little bit more suited to the business, the business world, where, there is just that extra element of kind of pace and dynamism, and you can move with pace. And also there's the potential for scale. So I got really interested in, well, great if you can have businesses which are designed around solving specific challenges, but actually, what if every business was contributing towards the solutions that we all need? And that's what, first of all, that's what we need, is every business being a force for good, to borrow some of the B Corp lingo. It's what we need, but also it's incredibly exciting, when you start thinking about the kind of shifts to the system that are necessary there so that every business can be a force for good. So that journey from kind of, I suppose marketing through to sort of the social enterprise stuff, through to international development and the challenges, and then sort of seeing actually this systems change or within business itself being ultimately the biggest tool we have as a society to solve our challenges. So fortunately, that led me to B Lab, where that's exactly what our mission is.
Well, that's you're truly a next generation. That's a next generation career. I mean, it's a fascinating. You look far too young to have done all that, and we're really proud at Springwise, and certainly as the chair of Springwise, which, as is part of the B Corp movement. I know you were there for 2 years as managing director, and you set the foundations for what we're doing now, which is continuing that really purposeful innovation that matters, and really doubling down on innovations that are making the world a better place. So your hand on the tiller is felt every day at Springwise, and it's amazing. When you landed this role, I I remember thinking, that is just such a great role, great role for you. I knew you a little bit. And also, it's such an important movement. And I was at the first B Corp event in London, in Camden, which was, I think, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I remember going to that and thinking, there's something really cool happening. So here we are, and something really cool is happening. I think there's 4,000 B Corps now in the world. I think that's right. And just for anyone who's listening who doesn't you touched on it, but what is the essence of the B Corp movement, and in particular the context in the UK, although this will be watched internationally, but I'm interested to understand how the UK is pioneering the movement. Are we moving quicker in the UK than in some of the other spaces, because it has American roots, right? So just for our listeners, explain a little bit about what's about some of those kind of issues.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and it's it's always an interesting question, that one, because some people ask that question and say, tell us about the B Corp certification and what it means. But your version of the question was, tell us about the movement. Which is, if the question's about the certification, I always make it about the movement, because this is, as you say, touched on it before, and it's about ultimately, changing the system. It's about redefining what the role of business is, so that it is no longer this kind of single-minded pursuit of growth and profit and the bottom line, but it's actually kind of reframing that contract between people and business, and seeing business ultimately as serving society for all of our benefit. So that's kind of the mission. In our kind of more specific framing, it's an equitable, just, regenerative economy that we're trying to create. And so in order to do that, what we do is our bread and butter is certifying businesses. So we have the B Corporation certification, which Springwise obviously carries. And what that is a reflection of two things, in essence. One is the actual kind of operating principles, the governance of the business is rooted in really the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And so what we do is we ask every B Corp to make a legal change, so they're formally, legally committed to serving people, planet, and profit. And that's a really crucial pillar of the certification. So every B Corp does that. Looks a little bit different wherever you are around the world, whether there's a separate legal form like there is in many states in the US, for example, or whether you can just amend your kind of articles of association, which is what happens in the UK. And then the second pillar of becoming a certified B Corp is the assessment. So every B Corp has to complete a very rigorous, as you can attest, assessment, which covers, really it's intended to be very holistic, covering everything from the governance, how a business treats its workers, all the way through to the environment, its interactions with customers and the community. And so a B Corp will fill out this assessment. They'll get a score, and if that score has to reach 80 points, and once it's reached 80 points or above, then we verify that score. So we go in and we obviously kind of have a team that checks and holds interviews, and in some businesses' case does a site visit and things like that. So verifies the score. Those two things come together: the mission lock, we call it, that first bit, and then the assessment. And those two things are kind of the secret sauce, which isn't so secret because it's all totally transparent, that make up a B Corp. And so the way that these two things fit together, that kind of lofty mission for changing the system, and then the certification, that's really the kind of that's the tricky bit. That's where our strategy comes in. How can we take these amazing leaders, whether business leaders, like yourself, who are living and breathing this, or whether it's the businesses and the case studies and the examples of amazing things they're doing, and use that as a kind of proof of concept to say, well, this is how all business should be operating. And that's where we work across the kind of cultural and the regulatory kind of spaces, advocating for changes to the law. On the one hand, we're looking for a change to the Companies Act, for example, in the UK. Or whether it's on the kind of cultural side, which is all about kind of the culture of business, how we look at redefining success, away from that kind of old school concept of it. So huge amount of work that my team does, working on all of that, all the way through from kind of really guiding businesses through the certification process, all the way through to kind of all of our great marketing comms activity, telling the stories of our B Corp. So we're a small but quickly growing team. As you say, in the UK, we're actually the fastest growing B Corp community in the world, which is incredibly exciting. We're racing. We hit 500 B Corps. I think it was back in March. So we're racing through certifications in the UK, and that's really, it's driven by. I'll stop rattling on in a second, but we've got a bit of a perfect storm here in the UK. We've got really enlightened consumers who are looking for businesses who sort of can match their values and can do so credibly, which obviously the certification proves. We've got investors who are looking for businesses who can prove their kind of ESG credentials, or that they're purpose driven. We've got a really kind of enlightened business community, business leaders who are recognizing that ultimately this is what good leadership looks like, and they need to find ways of not just walking the talk, but actually embedding it throughout their business. So we've got so many things kind of in our favor in the UK, and we're really just trying to capitalize on that right now and act with the kind of urgency that the big problems we have, climate change, inequality, the crisis of diversity and inclusion, all of these things demand incredible urgency. So it's up to us, really. It's incumbent on us to meet that challenge and grasp the opportunity we have.
Wow, thank you for that's a great. It's great to take the time, actually, Chris, to explain that for our listeners, and thank you for doing that. Congratulations on being the fastest growing in the world. Doesn't surprise me with your leadership, and as you say, this perfect storm. As you know, we work a lot with clients on their sustainability strategies and their kind of broader business strategies, and the amount of companies and CEOs that are coming to me and saying, what's the value of being a B Corp? How do I, is it worth it? And how do I do it? And all of that. And for me, that's a big indicator in the work you're doing and the cut through that your teams are having, and also the zeitgeist of consumers. I have a couple of questions, but I just wanted to return to accreditation, because it's the thing that I often get people saying, oh, we've looked at this and it's, we've gone through it once, and it's like, oh, I can't, it's really tough. And we took, we're a small business, we took 15 months from the beginning of that to the end. And I find that I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud that it was tough. And I'm really proud that we got put through the ringer at the end by your guys to really certify that what we do is, is kind of transparent and justified and certified. And we took, we've made some sacrifices, as you know, because we believe in the movement. And on the flip side of that, I also find that it has huge value. So we're very differentiated. No other consultancy in the country can say that they're a B Corp. I don't think at the size of us. There's some smaller ones, but the big ones can't, and they won't, because they'll have to change the way they behave, I think. And for our teams, people want to work for B Corps. So we're getting a lot of inbound, which is really cool. One thing that I've seen also is that people are now saying that they're kind of operating their companies along the principles of B Corp. And for me, that is a bit like, can we call it B Corp washing? And I've heard people talk about B Corp light. And one of the things that I think as a B Corp, maybe I would say this, but it's a tension, because I think that strictness and that accreditation that you have to really work for is really important, because it forces you to do the right thing. However, at 4,000 companies globally, that's a relatively small amount of companies. So how are you approaching that kind of tension, Chris? And what's the thinking about that? And I hope you're not going to say you're going to let anyone get away with saying they're a B Corp without really going through it all. What's going on?
No, we're certainly not, and you're absolutely right. There's so much in that. That's a great question, because it really speaks to so much of what we're trying to achieve and the way that we're trying to achieve it. I think you're right. I mean, first of all, you're right. 4,000 businesses around the world is not a lot, and that's. I mean, it's a lot, bearing in mind where we come from and the amount of work, as you say, that's gone into their certifications and the work that our teams do in verifying them. But even in even in the UK, as we're growing that quickly, there's still, we're never going to certify every business in the country, which again comes back to that kind of strategic question of how every B Corp can have a real kind of ripples of impact, and be the community itself of B Corps can be more than the sum of its parts, in really inspiring other businesses to act. There's a few things. I think, first of all, the assessment itself, it's important to say, is totally free and accessible. It's a public good, really. I think there are about 300 questions in the assessment. I don't have the exact number, but because it slightly changes depending on what your business is, how big it is, what sectors it operates in. But a business will answer 200 to 300 questions. But whatever that is, for each business that uses the assessment, that's totally free. Anybody or any business can go on and create an account and start filling it out and measure their business. And there's that old adage of, you can't manage what you can't measure. And so our intent there really is to get that assessment into the hands of as many businesses as possible, because ultimately, if we can do that, then they're on the journey. They're thinking about the right things, they're identifying the right improvements, and one day, hopefully, they become a B Corp. And to give you a sense for that, while there's about 4,000 B Corps around the world, there's about 100,000 businesses using the assessment. So it's also a way of really kind of expanding our reach. But of course, there needs to come a point where, as I said, those other actors within the system, like you said, employees, workers, customers, suppliers, other stakeholders, investors, can identify the businesses who have actually kind of reached a certain minimum standard. And that's where the certification comes in. So in our kind of product offer, if you like, as the B Corp movement, that the certification is always going to be that kind of gold standard. The businesses that we verified, the leaders within our community, who ultimately we rely on really to inspire others and pull others with us. So we're trying to do both. We're trying to get that reach, get that scale, and bring more and more people into the movement and on the journey. But we also really want to kind of champion the leaders, because ultimately so much of this is about leadership.
I think that's very reassuring, Chris. And, I think we should encourage everyone listening to get the questionnaire, go online and have a look and see if you can fit it in, even if you haven't started. And the second thing is, the people who are sort of talking about operating at B Corp, using it as a framework, just do it. Just do the assessment, and you have to make sacrifices. And there are some things that are tough, but if we want systemic change, you have to make some sacrifices. And I think that message needs to come through. And what's encouraging also, you touched on, is the investment community are now getting on top of this and now thinking it. And I imagine that there is evidence growing that B Corps are more valuable than non-B Corps. I imagine you're doing a little bit of work around that, which is for another topic, another time, unless you want to say anything quickly. But I want to move on to another topic.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we do. We've got some great research. Yeah, shows B Corps growing quicker and being more optimistic about the future. But yes. Yeah.
And I think I read some of that, and being more resilient in COVID and all of that, which is really exciting and encouraging. So Chris, I could talk to you about that forever, and it's so exciting to hear you talk and hear about the movement growing. But the just around the corner is the B Corp Global Climate Summit. Yeah. And that's happening next week. So at the end of June, beginning of July. And it's a global summit. So I guess that's been organized as a global initiative. But one of the things we're asking everyone listening to this, and our Springwise community across the world, which is, as you know, in 190 countries, over 100,000 people looking at our site and the newsletters every month, we would like them to kind of join. I think it's free, but it's free to join and register. Could you give us a bit of a view of what to expect and what's the objective from the climate summit in this very important year, just after G7 and leading up to COP26?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, I mean, that is really the starting point, I think, for the summit. What a crucial year. I can obviously speak from the UK perspective. Massive year for the UK, with the G7 here and with COP here, whether it's virtual or otherwise. It's Glasgow's COP. So incredibly exciting for that all to be happening in the UK. But of course, both those things, and COP certainly globally absolutely crucial. So the B Corp movement obviously is really focused on climate, on the climate emergency, and on the ways in which B Corps, but also businesses more broadly can contribute to the solutions and act with urgency. And we started this, in fact, in the last COP in Madrid, which is hard to believe was 18, 20, I don't know, many months ago, back at the end of 2019, which is obviously the last in-person COP, well, the last COP. We took a big delegation, again, mainly virtual, to COP to present net zero commitments. And so we're carrying that forward to this COP. Again, a big part of the climate summit is about kind of empowering businesses to make those kinds of commitments. The summit itself, I should say, is a 3-day, it's virtual. It is free, as you say, free to register, free to attend. The dates I need to look at because I need to make sure I get them right. June the 29th and 30th and July the 1st. So imminent. And yeah, the objectives are, there is going to be kind of, interactive workshop type content. A lot of it is global. There are sections of the summit which are global. And then there's kind of localized content as well. So it's a really nice kind of flow between the two. But we want to equip B Corps and businesses more broadly for that journey to net zero. But also there's kind of sort of, bigger objectives, I think, which are more about kind of aligning the business community and the B Corp community around kind of climate action in the longer term as well, and kind of building this sort of the global community of action that is necessary to tackle the climate emergency. So we want to sort of, as you can imagine, there's some incredible speakers coming together to kind of, start to build those sort of shared touch points and that kind of sense of community action. We also want to really kind of, one of the other objectives of the summit is to center climate justice. So, we want to really kind of champion the sort of human-centered kind of approach to climate action, so that we're ensuring that it's kind of that climate justice is at the heart of our response to the climate emergency. So there's a few objectives all the way through from the kind of lofty aspirational, let's all get behind this and let's all kind of catalyze as a community, all the way through to actually very practical and empowering stuff, how businesses can get on the net zero journey. And I could reel off some amazing speakers and stuff, but actually there's a great website which everyone should go to, which has been we have a global climate task force within the B Corp movement, which has pulled this summit together, and on their website there's a great summary of the summit.
Great. Well, I've had a look through, and I'm really looking forward to attending next week. It's fantastic, and just picking up on one of the things that I think is so powerful about the B Corp movement is this idea of community, and creating places where you can connect with people, even if it's virtually. And again, I remember the first event in Camden, and I've been to a couple of your other kind of UK summits when we're allowed to be in person, and really heard some compelling stories, personal stories. I remember one guy saying, I became a B Corp because I don't want private equity to get hold of my business and sell it, which I thought was great. But there's some really great community people, and we find that really valuable across Reset and Springwise to be part of that. And I'm delighted to be a B Corp ambassador and trying to push the messages as much as possible, Chris. So climate summit next week, everyone, please go to the website, have a look and register. One of the frustrating things, I guess, that I feel, and having dedicated now this part of my career to kind of pushing this agenda of sustainability and equality and kind of B Corp principles, if you like, is that stuff doesn't get done quick enough. And we are in an emergency, and it is urgent. And I have lots of kids, and I worry a lot about the next generations. Although we live in the most one of the most fortunate parts of the world here, and we mustn't forget the people who are suffering across the world because of, you know, a lot of the stuff that the first world, if you like, has, or the developed world has created a lot of these problems. So, and I was a bit disappointed with G7. You know, it sort of felt a bit wishy-washy. I mean, there were some things that came out. You know, Biden is clearly much better than his predecessor. But what's your feeling about stuff happening, Chris? And you've got a very unique kind of perspective. Do you really think that we're getting to the bottom of this, and the urgency is there? And are we going to really see in this pivotal year stuff happen that needs to happen, and that systemic change start?
Yeah, gosh, what a big question. Well, first of all, I agree with you. I mean, you know, things can't move quickly enough. I think you're absolutely right. You know, particularly when it comes to the climate emergency, I think that's increasing. I think there are fewer and fewer people who would question the urgency of action in tackling the climate emergency, and it's you know, blindingly obvious, I think, to us. So yeah, speed is of the essence. I think it's one of those questions where, yes, I think the sense of urgency and pushing action, you know, pushing this pace of action is incredibly valuable, but doing so in a way that you're also encouraging mass action. You know, we can't just have, you know, those very kind of, you know, nimble and fast actors racing ahead of everyone and leaving everyone else behind. So the big challenge is I think, kind of pushing ahead with the action, finding those leaders and finding those businesses who can act with real urgency and forge the path. We're at the kind of pace that's required, maybe still not quick enough, but, you know, getting closer, but in a way that creates this wake of, you know, mass businesses following behind them, and accelerating behind them. Because if we can't pull everyone else along with us, then you know, we need, you know, we don't just need pace, we also need scale. So it's our most profound challenge, I think, is to do both at the same time. So yeah, so the answer to your question is yes, I think we are seeing more and more urgency, and we are seeing more and more people acting faster, or businesses acting faster. But let's hitch ourselves to those. Let's hitch as many people as we can to those fast movers to make sure that we hit the scale as well.
No, I think you make a great point, and you're really making the point we started with. It's about a movement, and it's about a community, and I think inherent in what you're saying, and you may not want to say it, but I can, is that, you know, business is the answer to this. You know, governments, you know, will change, and there's always going to be, you know, there's always going to be massive differences between governments. But one of the attractive things about being in the movement of business is that businesses can be truly global, and can therefore have global impact in a way that politicians can't. And I think we do need to get the politicians to commit and to be more, you know, much more focused on this. Personally, I'm hoping that, you know, COP is going to be an example of that. But the business, the impact that we can have as business leaders, and you know, you had a very successful business career, and now you're doing this, which is, you know, I think fantastic. And I think more and more people are much more kind of engaged in this more purposeful existence, which I find much more fun, apart from anything else, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yes.
Look, final, I know we've got to get moving. I mean, again, we could talk for a long time, but my final kind of question is back to the Springwise community who are listening. What would you like the Springwise community globally to do, and what would you say to the innovators of this world related to this conversation, Chris?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it'll be no surprise to you, James. Innovation was where I was going to go. I mean, I think, you know, that's, you know, we spoke about it earlier, didn't we? But that was almost where I started. You know, my kind of journey was in the innovation space, and actually started off by getting really excited about, you know, the sort of the potency of business in coming up with new ideas and solving problems. And so, you know, I think knowing the Springwise community a little bit as I do, I think many or most of those in the Springwise community are already really switched on to these big challenges that we all face, and again, and to your point, kind of alive with the urgency of what it is we all face. I think my urging would be really maybe actually, if we take that as a given, that the Springwise community is totally on the same page as us, these problems need solving quickly. Business is an amazing tool to do so, the best tool to do so, because it can move at pace and create new ideas. Then maybe the urging that I would have is this one of community, this sense of, well, let's do it together. Actually, the Springwise community is knitted together by these common, these common sort of foundations and beliefs and values in a similar way to the B Corp community, which is as well. So, collaborate, communicate, and move together, because again, that's how we reach more people, and that's how we reach the scale that we need.
So Springwise is a movement, a global movement of innovation and innovators supporting the global movement of businesses as a force for good. The B movement sounds like a plan, Chris. Look, this has been amazing. We wish you and your team all the best. We thank you for everything you're doing. It's been one of my favorite moments since I got involved in Springwise, which will be 20 next year. Springwise is going to be 20.
Wow.
Established in 2002. And, we're delighted to support in every way we can. And thanks so much for your time today, Chris.
Thank you, James. No, it's been a real pleasure and great to reconnect with my Springwise roots and to have this chat with you. And look forward to more of the same in the months to come, and see you at the summit.
See you now.
Cheers.